So, when people thinks of horror films with killer wearing masks, they would bring up Jason the Killer, in a series of 12 films, with one even going as far as to put Jason in New York, when he was mostly in Vancouver for half the budget, and going as far in space like flipping Star Wars. These movies are good or bad, with some being both. Anyways, every killer has to start somewhere, and Jason's start with Friday the 13th Part 2. Yes, Part 2, because the killer in the first film was his mother and not him. But with all that said, let's start with
So the film was produced and directed by Sean S. Cunningham, who had previously worked with filmmaker Wes Craven on the film The Last House on the Left. Cunningham, inspired by John Carpenter's Halloween, wanted Friday the 13th to be shocking, visually stunning, and make you jump out of your seat. Wanting to distance himself from The Last House on the Left, Cunningham wanted Friday the 13th to be more of a roller coaster ride. The original screenplay was tentatively titled A Long Night at Camp Blood. While working on a redraft of the screenplay, Cunningham proposed the title Friday the 13th, after which Miller began redeveloping. Cunningham rushed out to place an advertisement in Variety using the Friday the 13th title. Worried that someone else owned the rights to the title and wanting to avoid potential lawsuits, Cunningham thought it would be best to find out immediately. He commissioned a New York advertising agency to develop his concept of the Friday the 13th logo, which consisted of big block letters bursting through a pane of glass. In the end, Cunningham believed there were no problems with the title, but distributor George Mansour stated, "There was a movie before ours called Friday the 13th, The Orphan. It was moderately successful. But someone still threatened to sue. Either Phil Scuderi paid them off, but it was finally resolved." The screenplay was completed in mid-1979 by Victor Miller, who later went on to write for several television soap operas, including Guiding Light, One Life to Live, and All My Children. At the time, Miller was living in Stratford, Connecticut, near Cunningham, and the two had begun collaborating on potential film projects. Miller delighted in inventing a serial killer who turned out to be somebody's mother, a murderer whose only motivation was her love for her child. "I took motherhood and turned it on its head, and I think that was great fun. Mrs. Voorhees was the mother I'd always wanted, a mother who would have killed for her kids." Miller was unhappy about the filmmaker's decision to make Jason Voorhees the killer in the sequels. Jason was dead from the very beginning. He was a victim, not a villain. The film these days suck, but the kills don't, so it's 4.5 out of 10 for me. Ha ha ha. It's the same film again, but somewhat better. The killer almost not cool with the blood because of the MPAA and the fact that some of the kills were copied from A Bay of Blood, so 4.6 out of 10. This film was made in 3D, so there is a lot of kills that are in 3D. But this film was meant to be the final one, but the film did so well that there was another film. And this 3D film is actually not bad. It's better than any other 3D film that came out at this time. So in this case, 6 out of 10, not bad.
Okay, so this was going the final one until just like part 3, it did so well that we caught another film. But this is somewhat the end of the OG Jason timeline because he dies in this one. And the fact that this is the best Friday the 13th for lots of fans, and me too, so 10 out of 10, go watch this. And the kills are great.
Alright, so this is the film that doesn't have Jason as the killer just like the first film, but the killer in this film is Roy Burns in a Jason-like suit and mask, with the kills being cut down hard by the MPAA, and that's because most of the film is people naked. Yes, naked. About 48% of the film. I swear it almost feels like OnlyFans most of the time. But besides that, 5 out of 10. Okay, so this is the film that feels like Bride of Chucky, which mean going into comedy while still being scary, and that's at 8 out of 10 for the most epic final battle of the film and the kills. Okay, this film was the film that was going to be Freddy vs. Jason until it was turned into Jason vs. a dollar store Carrie, and the final act was just as good as part 6, so 6.4 out of 10. This is the worst of the Friday the 13th film, the worst. The film is mostly on the boat and most of the shots of New York is Vancouver with only one shot actually in New York, so false title, and 1 out of 10 it's the worst. Okay, so this was also going to be the last, and it somewhat is. In this film, Jason is the killer and gets killed in the first few minutes and takes over other people to go killing again, and at the end get dragged to hell, and the kills are the best part of the film, so it's 9 out of 10. Okay, it's just Friday the 13th in space and is the last film in the Friday the 13th timeline. And yes, this is the film where the kills get more epic and the story is not bad, and we even get a new Jason named Uter Jason, which fits the name Jason X because he knew and improved but dies in the end. Anyways, 7 out of 10.
Okay, this film is just part 7, but better, and it's Freddy instead of $1 Carrie, and this is the film that made the biggest fat cash of all films. 9.9 out of 10.
It's the better reboot of any horror film, 9.9 out of 10.